Good morning. We're back. I'm going to take a big sip of coffee before we get started.
Yeah, it was a busy weekend. It was the end of the month, so we sent out our first subscription package for our top tier patrons. So thank
That's
you
right.
very, very much for your support. It means a lot to us, and hopefully those will be arriving shortly.
Yeah, no, it was really exciting putting that together. Thank you so much for making that such a success. We sent out 15, I think, packages that contained a notebook, a Blackwing pencil, a pamphlet that we wrote and printed, a link to my very first book that you can download, and other stuff, like some other goodies. So if you'd like to be on the list for the next JXJ Studio package, our study pack, please go to www.patreon.com/Julian and Julian. We're happy to add you to that list. We're now also taking international subscribers, which is a terrible idea for us because we actually lose money on international subscriptions.
But we think we can figure it out.
We think it's worth doing.
We have a month to figure it out.
Yeah. The whole idea of this project is we just want to keep doing this, and we want to do it with as many people as possible. So it's just like, we just want to do cool stuff. And the more you guys support us, the more cool stuff we can do.
Yes.
Okay, but I think we should sort of get started here.
Did you have your sip?
It's really strong this morning. It's like putting a fire in my belly.
It's a Monday coffee.
Okay, let us begin. Shall we begin? I think the YouTube is set up pretty okay.
Yeah.
Oh, now
You're a
I'm
little
out of
hidden.
frame, right? Okay.
I think if you...
There we go. Okay, so first of all, thank you everybody for joining. Look at this. My brother is in this as well. I love
hey.
this. Everybody go and send love to Paul Pops, my brilliant designer brother, who is now, I don't know, a space designer, I guess? Can we say that? Okay.
Space design.
Everybody go. I'm going to call out Paul here. That's pretty good. Okay, let us begin. So this class is going to be on humor, which is actually a terrible topic for a class because then you set the expectation that it's going to be really funny. And so I'm not just going to sit here and crack jokes. However, for those of you who are, the world is split into two types of people. The vast majority of people love Jenline's laughter. And then there's a small group of people that hate Jenline's laughter.
Although I felt a brief moment of semi-vindication when you and I were watching Stephen Colbert's Late Show because he has been doing it in his house. And of course, his wife is sitting off frame, just sort of giggling at his jokes. So I feel like, if Stephen Colbert's wife can do it, why can't I do it?
Nah, you're much better than her wife because his wife doesn't have her own show. If you guys, here's important if you're joining class for the first time. I teach every Monday, but on Friday, Jenline teaches her class. So on Friday, it's sort of like choose your professor. You can have me on Monday or Jenline on Friday. Okay, let us begin. There's a joke from The Watchmen. The Watchmen graphic novel by, Moore? What's his name? Not Michael Moore, not Thomas Moore, not Russell Moore, something Moore. We're going to find out. I'm sure someone remembers. Someone more, and there's a joke in there which I feel like I empathize with a lot. It's sort of a variation on a classic joke. All jokes are variations on classic jokes. Also, it's that there's a guy who goes into the shrink, and he says, "Oh, shrink, I feel so bad. I feel so sad. I feel so tired. It's like I could never get a smile on my face." And the shrink says, "Oh, I got the perfect cure for you. Did you know that the clown Pagliacci is in town? You should just go see Pagliacci." No one ever feels sad when they see Pagliacci. And then the guy starts crying. He's like, "But sir, don't you see? I am Pagliacci." That's my Italian accent. That's how I feel this morning. It's like, you want to have a good Monday? Why not go enjoy Julian's class? "But sir, don't you see? I am Julian." That's like that confrontation with yourself. Okay, but we're not just going to talk about humor. We're not just going to talk about philosophy. We're going to talk about the relationship of humor to ideology. Specifically. And there's many ways we can attack this subject. We're not just going to crack jokes. And sort of how humor can be something that kind of both exposes the dark underbelly of ideology and the status quo. You think about like the pathological laughter in the Joker movie, which is a very aggressive kind of laughter. We're going to talk about some of how laughter can be strange and unnerving. We're also going to talk about the way in which laughter can be reassuring. And laughter can actually be a way in which the system justifies its continuation.
Yeah, and we've also talked about how jokes are, in their own way, a dialectical structure. You can't skip ahead to the punchline. You have to follow along the steps through the joke to reach the end, and the joke and the punchline sort of reflects on what came before. I don't know if I'm skipping ahead to where you're going.
Yeah, no, you always know what I'm going to say, which is fine. Someone in the chat said Alan Moore. It's Alan Moore.
Alan
Yeah,
Moore,
exactly.
thank you
Alan
very
Moore.
much.
Okay, so what? Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're gonna get there eventually, because there is a reason why we want to talk about not just humor, but also about what the Germans call der Witz. Der Witz is, and der Witz is not even wit. It's not even the same thing as wit. It's specifically the formal structure of jokes, and what they can tell us about philosophy. So that's something that we're gonna do a little bit as well, I think. Does that make sense? This is a
sounds
really
good.
strong coffee. I'm actually gonna put it aside just for a moment. I think
Yeah,
it's
sure.
too strong for me right now.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
that's okay.
Look at this. I got both my hands now. I love this. I love this. You know, the millennial clutch is the clutching your coffee while you're talking. Do you
It's
know that
nice to
thing?
hold something warm.
It is
It's a
nice.
bit chilly. It's a bit chilly this morning.
Yeah.
All right.
I like holding warm things. Okay. So, you probably were or were not aware of this, but one of the underappreciated books that Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, wrote is he wrote a book about jokes and the relationship of jokes to the unconscious. And I said this before in this class, but when Freud was writing his famous book on dream analysis, he actually had two manuscripts on his table, either side of the table. One side he had the book on dream analysis, the other one on jokes. And depending on what kind of a mood he was in, he would work on one book or he would be working on the other book, basically. That's something that Freud did. And actually, people don't really know this, but reading Freud's book on jokes is not a bad way to get into Freud, because he's making a lot of the same points. He's just doing them in a slightly more fun way. And so one of the things about a joke is that, first of all, to explain a joke is to ruin it. This is like one of the most obvious ways in which a dream and a joke are the same. Like, you don't want to explain your dream to somebody. It's like torture. Like, if someone says, hey, I dreamt this, no matter how exciting, it's very, very boring to hear somebody's dream. Even if you love that person, like, I really don't want to hear your dreams. Like, I want to dream with you, but I don't need to hear what happened when you went into a room and you were stark naked and everybody was, you see what I mean? And so the same is true for jokes, in a sense. Jokes, by their very nature, cannot be explained. Now, why can a joke not be explained? Well, quite simply because a joke isn't about its content. It's about the form. It's about the structure that a joke takes. A joke has to unfold in your mind. And the whole point about having a punchline is that you don't really see where the joke is going until finally it kind of hits, right? I think everybody has had that experience. Like, I'm killing a joke right now by means of explaining it. And so the joke, jokes are in a way kind of manipulative. Like, they demand something of you, which is that you have to understand the inner workings or the inner logic of the joke in order for it to land. And there's always there's that delay where you haven't quite got a joke. There's something in your mind happening, and then suddenly you get the joke. We've all been there, right? Okay. So that's something I want you to keep in mind as we sort of this whole class is going to be a joke, basically. This whole class is a joke. It's going to unfurl in your mind, and I'm not going to formalize it completely. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so far?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
with you.
this is excellent. In German, there's something that's known as Galgenhumor. Galgenhumor. And Galgen means, it's the, what is it, where you get hanged?
Oh, like gallows.
Yeah, like a gallows humor. Yeah,
Okay.
gallows humor. Gallows humor. And gallows humor has kind of a peculiar position, right? Because gallows humors can always be two things. On the one hand, gallows humor can be I've got nothing left to lose. I'm gonna expose what the system is like. It can be very morbid. It can be dark. It can be something that actually tells the truth about a situation. But gallows humor can also be the kind of humor that Zizek calls tickling the balls of the master. This is very, very crass, but Zizek has this idea that all those late night comedy shows, for example, they don't really achieve anything in terms of political resistance. They just make it more bearable. For all those liberals who are upset about Trump, watching Colbert every night make jokes about Trump just makes Trump more bearable. It's not actually a political pushback. And so it gives you the satisfaction of thinking that you're doing something while at the same time not doing anything. So that's Galgenhumor can go both ways. It can go, you can say, oh, my life is so miserable, and I'm just gonna put up with it. Or it could be like, my life is so miserable, so screw everybody else, and I'm gonna take it right to the heart of the system, basically. Black humor is what we call it as well. But of course, a lot of humor is also humor that exists within communities. Humor that exists specifically, you only get it if you're part of that community. So so humor can have like, can be a glue, it can be binding, it can be like a story that you tell about yourself. There's jokes that you can't make about other people, but you can make within your own community, if you see what I mean. Yeah? Are you okay?
Yeah, yeah.
It's so
No,
weird, like
I'm
I'm so used to you like jumping in.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay, pretty good. I feel like I've set myself up here, because when you're talking about jokes, everybody's just waiting for you to
Waiting
tell
for
a
you
joke.
to tell a joke.
And I'm not going to tell a whole bunch of jokes. So, like, if that's what you want, like, I'm not a stand-up comic here. I'm a sit-down comic, basically. Generally can do boom, like, every time we include a bad joke, and just go. Okay, so I wanna slow it down a little bit. There's speaking of Gallows humor. Okay, so everybody wants a joke. I suppose we could have a joke. Is that you wouldn't really think this, but the philosopher Immanuel Kant, he actually wrote about jokes. But the weird thing about Immanuel Kant's jokes is like, they're not really very funny, because usually he's like trying to make a point, and sometimes he's even like trying to make jokes that are specifically unfunny. It's like the most Kantian thing to do. It's like, I'm gonna write a joke that's specifically not very funny. But some of them are kind of clever, and one of them is a play on a joke that Plato has as well. And it's the idea of a man, and it already sounds a little bit like a Jewish joke, so I'm not sure if Kant took it from the Jewish community, but he basically says, Kant says, so there's a man who's died, and there's a funeral, and there's not enough people showing up to the funeral. So he says that he has to offer people an incentive to go to the funeral. But he finds himself in a dilemma, which is that how do you get people to join the funeral? How do you get them to really show mourning and sadness? Is that he offers them money, basically offers them a bribe. But the more money he offers them, the happier they get. And so he keeps trying to give them more money so that they'll like start fake crying, but actually they're just getting happier. And the same is like, what's important here is like the contradiction. It's always part of jokes. There's tons of variations on that joke. Like that's a joke that's adapted from Plato, where Plato writes about a rhetorician, a sophist called Ion. And what Ion does is his job is he tries to make people cry. Like, he's like someone who makes like, today make like weepy movies, and he's happy when other people cry, right? That's basically the joke that Plato has. And if they don't cry, then he's not doing something right. He's not moving them, and then he's unhappy. And so what jokes are constantly doing is they're playing with these contradictions.
Right.
But that can be very physical too as well. Like, think about like Mr. Bean, like Rowan Atkinson, for example. So Rowan Atkinson actually shot a documentary where he talks about like what makes comedy. It's kind of great because it's a blend between jokes and comedy. And one of the ones that he uses, which he takes directly from Kant and from Freud, is that comedy works as a form of it's like unexpected juxtapositions. For example, one of them is Mr. Bean goes to like open a closet, and he opens the closet, and then there's another Mr. Bean in the closet. Like, not very funny to explain it, but basically like things that you don't expect. And so what's happening in every single comedic situation is that we have something that undermines the relationship between the form on the one hand, the form being the structure, and the content. So let me explain to you very quickly what form and content are. I feel like I've really jinxed this class though, because talking about humor, I feel like I have this obligation to be funny, and I think that I finally psyched you out about not laughing, which is like the worst class. It's like the worst class to have done that for.
Sorry.
That's not my intention. You can laugh to
Okay.
your heart's content.
Okay.
I realized that I didn't want to make you weird about it. That's fine.
It's okay.
One of the wonderful things about Jolene is that she laughs even when I don't make jokes. Whereas if I like try to make a joke, you're usually just like, yeah, whatever.
I laugh because I'm happy, not because I think things are particularly funny. Like, I do find you funny when you're being funny, but I'm
Yeah.
just really happy being with you. And so
You are a very happy person. That's fine.
Sorry.
One of the great things about being couples, we're also so psychologically in tune with each other that like we just sense what the other person is.
Yes. No, I wanna give you the stage. Well, I wanted to circle back a little bit about what you were talking about. Both the particular and the universal, and I don't know if we're going down this route, but this idea that jokes can be like community confining, and you only get the joke if you're part of that community, whereas there's also the challenge of how do you make humor universal. Mr. Bean's a great example of that, because he's one of the most successful comedians in the sense that his humor is universal, and his humor, I mean, the Mr. Bean stuff doesn't need subtitles. It doesn't need text in order to come through for viewers.
Yeah, part of why Rowan Atkinson was the wealthiest man, or is the wealthiest man in the United Kingdom, is because his comedy sells to every country on earth. You don't have to translate it. Like, the gags, the physical comedy of Mr. Bean is genuinely universal. Whereas, let's say, Jewish jokes that were told within Jewish communities, even though they're funny, a lot of them are particular to knowing what that community is. So the joke is a form of recognition. Now, at the end of the day, a universal joke and a particular joke both function and hinge on the idea of recognition, right? There's that moment of, oh, I realize what this is, and so like it lights up in your brain. Jokes bring people together. Like, that's really what jokes do, is at the end of the day, a joke makes you feel connected to somebody because you're seeing it the way they're seeing it, without being pedantically told to. I want to like take a step back before we talk a little bit more about that, and if that makes sense to you. My energy's kind of low today. It's like,
okay.
I feel like I am Pagliacci today. Like, I've set myself up a little bit. So the thing here is, one of the people, okay, so I want to talk about Mark Twain for a moment, because I want to talk about the relationship between comedy and tragedy. You've probably heard like the Marx bit, the first is tragedy, then is farce. History repeats itself. First is tragedy, then is farce. This is something that's like, everybody knows. It's one of those things that are part of the pop culture, cultural references.
Yes.
What were you going to say?
Yeah, the people don't often realize his marks, but yes.
Yeah, first is tragedy, then is farce. So first it starts as something sad, then it repeats itself as something that is funny, but also tragicomic, right?
Like perversely,
exactly, yeah. And so basically, oops, sorry, I just pressed a button and something terrible happened. Okay, well, it doesn't really matter. I suppose I can just talk like this. And so the thing there is that relationship between tragedy and comedy is actually pretty profound, because think about this, most tragedy is a comedy for somebody else. Like, and this is more than just the German idea of Schadenfreude. Of course, we have like intellectual jokes that like purely work because we're enjoying like a pun or something. Like, no one suffers because of a pun. But then we have, sorry, this is like super distracting. I have no idea what. There we go. Okay, so like puns are just working on the intellectual level, and I love puns because puns are a form of witticism. But tragedy, in its like comedy in its purest form, can also be the tragedy of someone else. Imagine like someone else falls down the stairs. One of the things that we have when somebody falls down the stairs is really hard not to laugh. Like, you've experienced this being like together. It'll be really tragic, like you're a couple and something really bad happens to you, and the other person just instinctually has to like stifle laughter.
Yes.
Okay, so why does this happen? Why do we laugh at the suffering of others? There's various theories about this, and one of them, the Freudian theory, is that we don't know what to do with our feelings, with our emotions, basically. And so there is no direct correspondence between emotions in general.
Yes.
All emotions tend to be a form or like a new thing based on a previously repressed emotion. And so what's happening is that you see someone falling or hurting themselves, and you want to express empathy, but it actually comes out as being the opposite. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. Now, I have done that. I am 100% guilty of that.
Yeah, you've totally done that, right?
Yes.
There's something, and this is really important.
And it's terrible. Like, it's a terrible thing, especially if something, like, I've seen you fall, take a bad fall.
Yeah.
And my instinct is to laugh because I don't know what to do. I want to just like run over and pick you up and just say everything's gonna be okay, but I can't really do that. I'm just standing there laughing. Yeah,
but I mean, this is true even for babies. Like babies, I don't know if you've ever been around an infant, but babies really enjoy the suffering of others. It's like, it's this obscene thing, which is like a baby will be crying, but then like if someone hits you over the head, the baby starts laughing. Like, babies understand physical comedy in a way that's just surprising.
Yeah.
And so like that, like if you want to cheer up a baby, if you just start like slapping yourself, like they love it. And part of it is like, it's not even that they enjoy pain. They enjoy the absurdity of it. They enjoy the juxtaposition of it. And so what's happening in a sense is, and this works both ways. Let's say that you're laughing at somebody else's tragedy. It's also that we confuse emotions all the time. One of the ones that you and I talk about a lot is that often when we want love, we actually provoke the opposite reaction from somebody. So let's say that I want love or attention from somebody. I'm actually going to try to annoy them. I'm going to try to make that person
try and get attention.
Exactly. And but this is also really important, is that like, what do you do? Oh, you're getting to.
It's a little sunny.
It's really sunny this morning. part of that is also like, from a Freudian perspective there's this idea that, for example, when you're, oh, I got totally distracted from you doing that.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, it's okay. It's funny how much that happens. So, when we're, a lot of the times, like when we're lashing out in anger towards someone, it can also be like we're trying to show love to that person, but it's coming out as the wrong emotion. You see what I mean? Like it's coming out as the opposite. That's something that Freud talks about all the time, is like that we have, like, we're trying to do one thing emotionally, but something else is coming out. And so the term that Freud uses for that is the return of the repressed. Basically, Freud says that everything that is repressed will in some way, shape, or form come back to haunt you. Whether you say that we're now living in the end of history, whether you say that we're living in the end of ideology, whether you're trying to repress some emotion, it will come back. But here's the funny part, like here's the humorous part, in a sense. That thing that you repress never comes back as the same thing that it is. It sneaks up on you and it shows up like, ta-da, in a different costume, basically. So the return of the repressed is always the repressed sneaking up in you and attacking you again, but it's coming in the guise of something else.
Right.
And so the way to understand emotions isn't to say what repression is in this emotion, but how did this repressed thing structurally change into a new emotion? And that's again where Freud has the same analogy for how dreams function. When someone tells you your dream, you don't want to know what the content is. The content's meaningless. Like at the end of the day, the content is not very profound. What's interesting is, why did the repressed element manifest in that content? Like if I dream of money, it doesn't mean that I want money per se. Do you see what I mean? Why, the question isn't what am I dreaming about, is why am I dreaming about that? And so the unconscious kind of works in the same way that a joke works.
Right.
And the return of the repressed is inherently comic. Because you're trying to repress something, you're trying to keep it in the bottle. Like imagine the physical comedy of this for a moment. Like you're trying to keep it in the bottle, but it's never going to happen. It's going to come out at some time. Like you can only repress something so much.
Yes.
And what Freud is basically saying is, he's saying that's not just active repression, it's also unconscious repression. And so in a way, all of your actions become comedic, they become tragicomic, because you're constantly acting out the return of the repressed. It's just like constantly coming back to bite you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm with you. And it seems like it goes a step further, though, when you're, I mean, Mark Twain, the juxtaposition is more than just,
Well, I want to talk about Mark Twain, actually.
yeah.
What are you going to say?
No, go for it.
No, go for it.
Is that this idea that comedy can also be is someone else's tragedy is, I mean, the resonance for Mark Twain is that his tragedy informed his comedy. And this idea that a comic figure also has to be in some ways tragic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the theme that we have, right? Which is that anger and frustration can be channeled into comedy, and that all comics are like secretly dealing with their past trauma. To some extent, that's true. Like you and I have talked about how that's true for the guy who wrote the Discworld series. What's his name?
Terry Pratchett.
Terry Pratchett, exactly. Like Terry Pratchett. When Terry Pratchett passed away, Neil Gaiman wrote a column for The Guardian where he said that everybody's celebrating how funny Terry Pratchett was, but actually Terry Pratchett was a very angry, bitter man. And this isn't because Neil Gaiman's hating on Terry Pratchett. They were close friends and collaborators. It's because he wanted to properly explain where the incentive to be funny was coming from. Of course, this is also the relationship between comedy and satire, right? Satire can be critical of society. Of course, sarcasm and irony are both forms of angry humor as well. So to go back to Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a wit, right? Mark Twain was someone like, for example, I mean, totally different, but if you think about like a public wit, like, I'm really, really slow today on names. What's the name of what's his name? The guy who wrote the painting, the book about the painting, The Importance of Being Earnest. You can tell I haven't slept.
Yeah. No, I know.
We're not putting on a good show today. This is bad. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And the importance of being... So Mark Twain has this expression.
Yeah.
Mark Twain is basically a public wit, right? He likes to make people laugh. And what Mark Twain is saying... Mark Twain has this expression, which is that he says... It's kind of a philosophical proposition. He says, in heaven, there is no laughter. He says, in heaven, there is no laughter. Oscar Wilde, thank you very much. Someone just said Oscar Wilde. I can't believe I blanked on Oscar Wilde. It's a slow morning.
Slow morning.
We went to bed really late. Okay, Oscar Wilde. Yes, exactly. And so when Mark Twain says that there is no laughter in heaven, it's kind of like weird. First of all, we're setting up a joke. We don't quite get it yet, basically, right? Like, why would there be no laughter in heaven? After all, you think of heaven as being a joyful place, a place where people are just, I don't know, whatever you do when you're happy, like playing the trumpet or something, I don't know. And the reason he says that there is no laughter in heaven is because there is no tragedy in heaven. And for Mark Twain, all laughter has to come from tragedy. Tragedy is the source of comedy. Tragedy in another guise is always comedic. Someone else's suffering can be the source of your joy. Now, I realize that sounds really evil. It's like, oh, you're making fun of people. But it's not about making fun of people. It's that there's something in tragedy that contains the kernel of comedy already.
Well, and I think that there's also the aspect of laughter as a coping mechanism. I mean, you can laugh at other people's misfortune, but you can also laugh at your own misfortune. Like if I don't know, if I'm cooking in the kitchen and I like drop an egg on the floor, like there's something that's so like awful about it, I can't help but laugh at it because it just like it's so frustrating that laughter is the only way that I can deal with my frustration. So it's even like, so I'm saying as like a
as a coping mechanism.
Coping mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that's true. Yeah, no, I suppose that's true.
Okay.
Coping mechanism. I feel like we say everything is a coping mechanism. Like, I'm too much of a Freudian to believe in coping mechanisms. I think we have the illusion of coping mechanisms. But what you're saying is, again, that there's a contradiction where something happens and you respond to it with laughter, even if it's actually something bad that's happening. There's this expression that the Germans, the English. The English are the only people that can experience Schadenfreude on their own behalf, right? Because Schadenfreude, German translates to Schade is like damage or pain, and Freude is pleasure, and so it's pleasure at your own suffering. So you're right. In a sense, if you want to be Sisyphus, if you want to take control of your destiny, of your fate, you could decide to laugh at your own destiny. You could sort of laugh in the face of that. But there's something very abysmal about this, right? This is where we're starting to go a little bit, where laughter can be also laughter in the face of nothingness, of a certain meaninglessness. Like, laughter can be very pathological, and laughter, when it becomes detached from the formal structure of a joke or of wit, can become very anarchic. I mean, that's sort of the whole with the Joker thing, right? This like pathological eruption of laughter, basically. So one of the philosophers who probably uses laughter more than everybody, or at least jokes more than anybody, is Slavoj Žižek. And if we're going to talk about philosophy and jokes, at some point we talk about Žižek. And the thing about Žižek's jokes is not only are they pretty clever, and most of them are taken from like Eastern European or Jewish traditions of jokes, is they usually serve to illustrate theoretical points. And one of them, I realize that this is just going to be a whole class of like explaining jokes, but one of Žižek's jokes that's very well known is the one about the coffee and the cream. Even on the internet, I see this sometimes. And it's interesting that that joke in particular resonates so much with people. Do you remember how that joke
The internet loves coffee.
Do you remember that joke?
Yeah, of course. A man goes to a restaurant and orders a cup of coffee without milk. And the waitress comes back with a cup of coffee and says, "I'm sorry, we're out of milk, but I've brought you a cup of coffee without cream." Sort of. I butchered it a little. I tried to shorten it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, no, exactly. Someone orders a coffee, and the waiter brings that cup of coffee, and the person who ordered the coffee says, "Waiter, this is a cup of coffee without milk. When I ordered a cup of coffee without cream." That's basically a joke.
I also feel like people, like everyone has had a job in the service industry and had to deal with terrible customers, and so that also kind of appeals.
No, you're totally wrong here.
Okay.
Totally wrong here. That's not what this is about at all. It has nothing to do with the social interaction. It has everything to do with the theoretical point that Žižek's trying to make about the way in which lack is constitutive. This is one of Žižek's this is an argument that Žižek makes throughout every single book. Is he's obsessed with the Lacanian notion of lack, that emptiness or nothingness is actually constitutive. As someone says it the other way around. It does not matter which way you tell that joke, but I love it. I love it. Yeah.
I feel like that's a variation on the joke.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but this is the thing for Žižek, is that the absence of something doesn't mean that it has no impact. Absence is actually something that gives meaning. It's essentially a Western philosophical argument about the importance of nothing and nothingness. This is a lecture series that I did previously, right? If you really love nothing. And so for the joke here, it's very illustrative of the fact that what Žižek's trying to say is that from a Lacanian perspective, lack and the drive to fill the lack and the different ways we fill lack is very important. And that's exactly for Zizek how ideology functions. We talked about this, which is that when you have something that is empty, a coffee without cream, for example, the term society, right? And you're trying to fill in that society, you don't fill it in with a positive substance, you fill it in with another lack. Let's say that you're a communist. For you, society is something very different than if you're a capitalist. It's a very different way of conceptualizing society. And so you take one empty thing, one abstraction, and you try to basically substitute it with another abstraction. And so if you're a communist, you have a very different idea of what nothing means or what society means than if you're capitalist, you have a very different idea of what nothing means or what society means. And so the empty space and the interpretation, the filling in of that gap is itself a very important constitutive process. Do you see what I mean? And that's kind of what that joke's going towards.
Yes.
Go back to the comment from Bury Me in Moondust. I do appreciate the correction. I don't want to sound like I'm just jumping on people here. This is one of the funny things about jokes in general, right? Is that jokes are always passed on and they're always continuously changing, in a sense. And like we have this problem about like ownerships of jokes today on the internet, where comics write jokes, and then the question is like, who owns like the commercial rights to that joke? And how far do you extend that? How far can you make elaborations on the same joke? Another thing about jokes and about wit is that, in a sense, a joke can be a defensive mechanism, right? If you tell a joke, you don't actually have to say anything about you. Like a joke can be part of why wit became part of like the gentlemanly culture of the British elite social classes was specifically because it was a form of social detachment. You don't actually have to be invested in anything if you make a joke. You don't have to have sincerity about something if you just dismiss it as being funny. And so comedy in that sense, to go back to that idea of like the Gallows Humor, comedy can also be very stultifying, can be very much part of the status quo. It's really easy to just wave something off if you make a joke about it.
Well, that's also like P.G. Wodehouse and that sort of like golden era of British comedy that's like Jeeves and Wooster, and it's sort of idealizing what British upper class is, but also pointing fun at it without actually undermining it.
Yeah. But that's and it's okay. Like, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Like, I'm not saying that all jokes have to be bricks that we throw through the, I don't know, the glass houses of power or whatever. That's not my point. But like, jokes can take on a lot of different functions here, as it were. Okay, so I want to go back briefly to form and content, because we're trying to build an argument here. And so the idea of form and content is something that usually goes back to art critique or art history or artistic practice. And we also find it in literary analysis. And basically, if you want to understand the difference between form and content, you can make it relatively simple. Form is how something is made. So it's the technique, it's the, the materials that are used, it's the style in which something is depicted. It's everything that goes into the creation of a work of art. So it's the form of that work of art. And then we have the content, and the content is that which is depicted in the work of art itself. So is this a picture of a bird, or is it a picture of grapes? Is this a retelling of a mythical story, or is it the upteenth depiction of Jesus Christ, something like this, right? So we have the relationship between the form on the one hand, which is how something is made, and then we have the content, which is what it is depicting or what is inside of it. Now, one of the things that I'm going to try to explain to you is that a definition for ideology and the critique of ideology is to investigate not just the form, not just the content, but specifically the content of the form itself. So the argument that we're going to have to make in the remaining 20 minutes of this class is that form can have its own content. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to break that. You seem confused.
Yeah, no. I'm with you. I was thinking a little bit. I mean, I didn't know if you had an example. I was thinking about the Nike tennis shoes that contained the drop of blood.
Oh, that's a nice one. Yeah. That's a really good one. Explain. I mean, everyone knows.
I mean,
With the
probably knows better.
Lil Nas X ones?
Yeah, the Lil Nas X Nike shoes. I think they were Nike shoes, even though Nike has said that they're not affiliated with Nike.
Something like that, yeah.
And the idea that there were like divine shoes and then there were satanic shoes, and he released 666, and they were said to contain a drop of human blood.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that relate to? I mean, it does.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying,
So the idea is that it's not. I mean, the drop of blood for me is both form and content,
Yeah, exactly.
actually, because it is content in the sense that there is a physical droplet of human blood, and yet that is also the form as taking on a part, being a part of the shoe, which isn't really necessary. I mean, many runners have blood in their shoes and don't sell them for...
The real blood that goes into Nike shoes is the blood of all the workers in the sweatshops.
I mean, there's so many other layers that you can add on top of it.
Well,
yes.
and the satanic overtones here, because it was specifically a counterpoint to the shoe that had a drop of holy water in it, right? That was part of that. It's okay, so first of all, I'm really glad you introduced this to it, because it's a really good example. First of all, Nike shoes by themselves are already ideological because they're not just bought to be worn. Like, if you're thinking purely about form and content, a shoe is something that you use to protect your feet. This is one of the beauties of this really famous painting by Van Gogh, where it's like workman's boots, and it's just like the leather boots detached from mise en scène. So there's no background, there's no particular lighting, there's no person in the boots, it's just the boots themselves. And in a sense, it's already like a foreshadowing of a critique of the idea that you should pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. The idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps is also very Hegelian, right? Because for Hegel, the problem is always, how do you jump out of your own shadow? How do you pull yourself out of the swamp by your own hair? How does movement become self-animating, as it were? And so one of the things that happens with the symptom, whether it's the commodity form, like in... the shoe or the return of the repressed is something that seems to be animating itself, even though it's coming from somewhere else. To make that a lot more specific, with the shoe that you're mentioning, the Lil Nas X shoe, the whole point of that shoe, the gimmick as it were, because the gimmick is always related to the commodity form, right? Gimmicks, so there's something we could do a whole lecture on. What is a gimmick and the theory of the gimmick? Because a gimmick is related to humor. And a gimmick is specifically when something doesn't just serve a purpose, but the fact that it serves a sort of like a pleasure of saying, here's a purpose that doesn't need to be served. That's what a gimmick is, right?
It's the will it blend.
Yeah, the will it blend, exactly. No
Sorry.
one remembers. Generally with these millennial references.
You're welcome.
Will it blend. There you go. No one knows what that means anymore. I love it. Okay. So... yeah, Demid in the comments is pointing out that no one had a problem when it was about holy water, and everyone had a problem when it was about Satanism. I mean,
which is exactly part of the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. But part of it here is that the drop in it, it doesn't technically matter. Like, no one's gonna check if that drop is there. There's no physical manifestation of that drop of blood or the drop of holy water being there. It's a purely symbolic exercise. And so what's so good about your example, I'm really glad you made it, is that here we have the form, the way in which it was made, completely informing the content, right? It completely informs the content. And so we have, what I said earlier, the content of the form itself. If the form is, you use a drop of human blood and put it in a shoe, that's part of the way it's made, all of a sudden, that becomes the only thing people want to talk about, that shoe. And so we have here the content, right? The thing which is being depicted isn't the shoe, it's not the color. The thing which is being depicted is the form, which is you've put this drop of blood in it.
Right.
So it's actually a really, really good example. You're more on today than I am. I want to appreciate you for that.
I'm giving you space for
I really am happy to have such a good
ideas.
co-pilot here. Yeah, exactly.
You're very welcome.
That's
because I'm having my coffee.
I don't know how long people have watched these classes, but we did a class in the previous series on Sex and the City, on shoes and commodity forms. Like, shoes are always kind of interesting to talk about in general.
Yeah.
So there's that relationship between the form and the content. But like from an artistic perspective, think about like Malevich's Black Square, for example. Like, because Malevich also shows like the abysmal part of that, basically, where form and content like
collapse.
Yeah, and that's the problem is like when form and content become tautological, when they become synonymous, when the form is the content and the content is the form, that's a very That's the coffee without cream and the coffee without milk. That's the point of pure constitutive emptiness. It's a form of abysmal nothingness. And so pointing that out, as Malevich does in his Square, is potentially emancipatory, but also potentially horrific. Whenever we're looking at ideology, this is important to me as part of this series. If you want to put those glasses on to look at ideology, you have something in mind?
No.
Okay. Whenever you put those glasses on to look at ideology, we've got like, I don't know, maybe these will be our, Zizek always says this, like these are our ideology glasses right here. When you put these on, what you're looking for, what your laser vision is looking for, is the content of the form. In other words, what is the story being told or being sold to you through the way in which it is presented? For example, if you want to sell a handbag, it's really hard to just sell a piece of leather. So a piece of leather has to become aspirational. And not just aspirational, because there's not that much you can do with a handbag. You can put stuff in it, you can hit people with it. Specifically, it has to become a story about you and the kind of person you want to be. And so the way to get people's attention is a face. People like looking at faces. People don't like looking at handbags. And so fashion photography will have faces of preferably famous people with handbags or something, right? That's how we sell that item. Now, this isn't to be cynical. This is, and I'm not even saying that this is ideology yet, but we're starting to look at the relationship between form and content.
Yeah.
A really good example. Let's say the coffee that you're drinking right now, the coffee that you bought. If you get a pack of that coffee, it's like buying chocolate. First of all, it's expensive coffee. And part of making that coffee so expensive is it has to tell you a story about that coffee, why you're buying it. We don't actually have a bag of it here. Usually we do. So what does the coffee usually say on it? The coffee we buy.
Oh, it always has a story about the farm where it's grown and the producers and all of that. I mean, well, I was just thinking about Face on Coffee. Starbucks, of course, has the figurehead, right?
Yeah, but that's, I mean,
That's
sorry.
not even.
That's not even where I want to go here. Mermaids might sell coffee, but I think that, so yeah, let's go with the pack for a moment, right?
Yeah.
So the coffee that Julian and I buy always has a story on the back.
But even bottles of wine always have a story. There has to be a narrative sales pitch,
Yeah, where's this from? You want to, here's not just this product that came to you from the, I don't know, the pit of capitalism. Instead, you are having in your hands a product that was harvested by a family in Guatemala, and this family has been slowly working up their way towards a cooperative to invest in their community, etc., etc., etc. So the coffee, and part of that, it will have that story on it. It'll also have usually a message about this is organic coffee, and something like, thank you for buying this, you're making the world a better place, etc. We do that in our classes all the time. When we say that we want to make online learning global, free, and accessible for everyone, and then we have the pitch for the Patreon, we're basically saying, become a patron and feel good about making these classes free for everybody else. And so, since that's what they're selling you, is you're not just buying coffee, you're not just buying chocolate, you're buying something that is telling you that you are a good person. And here's the funny shift, right? Because first it was that we're being told that we're buying something to be decadent. Like, think about the Magnum commercials, the Magnum ice cream commercials. When you're like, the whole point is, it's always
guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. It's always targeted at women. It's always saying, women, you're so tough.
Break the rules of your diet because you've worked so hard.
Yeah, you're so tough on yourself. Here's something that you can indulge in, and it has all the benefits of sex without the unnecessary gross parts of sex, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, it has that whole, like, who needs a partner if you can have a Magnum? The whole shape of the Magnum is already like, let's face it. I mean, it's like bulbous, dark, phallic thing. Look at a Magnum commercial, and then she puts it in her mouth and licks it.
Any cooking show, but...
Yeah, but let me, to just finish the thought here. I'm not saying, this is really important, I'm not saying Magnum equals penis, woman wants penis, woman buys Magnum. That would be on explaining the contents of your dream. That's not how it works at all. Instead it is, why is it being presented this way? This is really, really important. So I want you to focus on this for a moment. It's not to say, oh, the Magnum is a penis, the woman wants a penis. It's specifically to look at the content of the form. why is it being sold that way? And it's being sold that way because you're constantly told that to make purchases is supposed to be about making the world a better place. And Magnum is telling you you're making the purchase of ice cream not for anybody else, but for you. This is your pleasure. You don't have to share this pleasure with anybody. This isn't something that is going to suddenly make the world magically better for everybody else. And so what Magnum is selling you is pure decadence, pure indulgence. That's specifically the invention also of late 20th century, is the idea that consumer culture is decadent. And then we enter the 21st century, we're no longer allowed to enjoy anything anymore.
Well,
we're supposed to constantly feel bad. And so now we make purchases to make up for feeling bad. It's like you go on a plane trip and you have to pay extra so that they tell you we've planted 50 trees for your plane ride. So there's that reversal that takes place. And it's important to understand how that works. You were going to say?
Well, it's interesting how you talk about the Magnum being an indulgence, because it actually seems as though that guilt displacement is sort of the modern version of the Catholic indulgence. The indulgence being the idea that you could give money to the church and absolve your sins.
And that's
Right.
the other way around, right? Wouldn't buying coffee be absolving your sins?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah,
is that buying the consumer good that has the virtuous story is absolving you of participating in the consumer culture, and that's sort of like a modern day indulgence.
But this is true for everything in society. The idea that the fix, the solution to our problems is to buy more. More consumer society. You turn on the radio and they say, "Good morning, America. We're doing great. The pandemic is easing off." And how do we know we're doing great? Not because we're looking at the death toll, not because we're looking at inequality, not because we're looking at the hospitals. America is back in business. We're looking at the spending power of Americans to tell ourselves that everything is okay. If Americans are buying crap, it means that everything is okay. Now, and in a sense, that's true, right? It's not a bad measure of how a society is doing, is how many Magnums they're buying. But at the end of the day, that's not a good measure of anything.
That's an incomplete measure.
Yeah, it's a totally incomplete measure. One of the funny things, though, is like we have certain industries that are crisis-proof. And one of those, I find this very hopeful, one of those industries that is crisis-proof so far has actually been books. People buy books no matter what. Even if they're broke, people buy books, which I think is kind of wonderful. It's like Brecht has this thing, which is like, I forget what it is exactly. He says, "Where will the singing go when the dark times come?" And he says, "The singing will go nowhere. We'll just sing about the dark times." And that's how books work. Books don't go anywhere when the dark times come. Books just are about the dark times, in a sense. Okay, so what I want to go back here briefly to that point, which is that we're not looking at consumer culture is evil, oh, you're just selling me the dream, etc. We're looking specifically at why is it being sold that way. You and I have this commercial that you and I really like. It's a commercial about a car, and they're touting it as the world's first storytelling machine. Right? I don't know what brand of car it is, but it's the world's first storytelling machine. Which, first of all, the world's first storytelling machine are human beings. I mean, this is very Deleuzian in a sense. Like, we're narrative beings. We'll see a story in anything. Like, someone could throw a ball into the air, and we have the anticipation of that ball landing again. Like, we're narrative beings. We're constantly anticipating. That's why jokes work. We're anticipating where the joke is going. We're narrative beings. We're storytelling machines. We see everything as a narrative. We see everything as a potential joke. And so what's interesting about those car commercials is the car commercials, it's not just about saying we're selling you something that is going to take you places. We're not just going to say we're going to sell you a car that's going to make you look good towards other people. We're not even selling the fact that this car is faster than other cars or more ethically complete. We're specifically selling a pure abstraction, a coffee without cream at this point. We have a car that is a storytelling machine. Well, first of all, literally, no one wants that. Like, what would that even mean? Your car would tell you stories. I guess it means it plays podcasts or something, right? The whole point here is that your car is not a vehicle of, I don't know, it's not a vehicle of, what do we call that? Like
transportation.
Transportation. It's not a vehicle of transportation. It's a vehicle of expression, of communication.
Yeah.
Because that is ultimately where we are at in our society, is that we justify purchases. As a good Freudian slip, purposes and purchase. A purchase is a purpose. you have to justify the purchase because it is something not that you want to be, but it is something that you will do. You're buying something to invest in yourself.
Right.
That is how we sell things to people now. We went from be decadent, buy stuff so that you can feel good, which is a totally valid reason to sell something to somebody. Then we went through the phase of saying, buy something so that you can feel good about the world. You can feel like you've contributed towards the world. And now we've come full circle. And now we're saying you can buy something to feel good about yourself, but only if feeling good about yourself is how you're aspirationally doing more.
Well, it's how you express your identity. It's how you manifest your potential and your individuality is through consumption, which is yeah.
And so it's no longer I'm buying into a fantasy, just I'm buying something to make me feel good, like I'm going to get a massage. And then it's no longer I'm getting a massage on behalf of the third world, which is that's what a latte is selling you, right?
Yeah.
Do this for charity. Now it's I'm getting this because it will make me be a more aspirational, productive, hardworking person. In other words, my leisure time is now the condition for not having leisure. I'm purchasing access. I'm purchasing what I believe is access to a certain market that I can now participate in.
Right.
That's how everything is sold today. Buy this thing so that you can create more spending power. We're no longer even buying something for what it is. We're not buying something for what it is not. We're buying something, strictly speaking, to be able to buy more things.
Yeah, and I think the cynical take is to just see that as pure, consumerism, consumer ideology, and as long as we see that and we cut through that, then we can, see sort of the real world. But that's where I think the relationship between form and content is really useful.
Yeah, because I'm actually leading up to my theoretical argument at the end, because we're reaching the end of this class. I always like this, like I said, it's like a joke. It's like a very bad joke where we're setting up all the steps. If you read Zizek's Sublime Object of Ideology, and this is something I promised to talk about in the previous class because we missed out on it. The first chapter, he makes the argument that it was actually Marx who invented the symptom and not Freud. So the idea of the return of the repressed is something that, according to Zizek, Marx invented and not Freud. Now, first of all, this is classic Zizek, because for Zizek, there's this love triangle between Lacan, which is essentially Freud, but through a Lacanian lens. So Lacanian psychoanalysis, Marxist theory, and Hegelian idealism. That's if you had a pinball machine of Zizek's philosophy, that would basically be the triple 1000 scoring point. It goes ding, 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 ding. It's just constantly there's bells and whistles, and there's parts where it lights up and there's music, but it's basically bouncing back and forth between Hegel, Lacan, and Marx, which is another way of saying Hegel, Freud, and Marx. And the argument that he's making here, that Zizek's making, is that there's a similarity between the way in which Freud conceptualizes the symptom and the way in which Marx conceptualizes the commodity form. Because the commodity is never actually just an expression of some buried intention or content. The commodity is always a return of the repressed. The commodity is always symptomatic because it's something that is making up for a specific experienced lack or gap. But let's build up this argument a little bit more carefully, right? Between Marx and Freud. One of the things that people criticize Freud for, rightfully and unrightfully, is they say, the dream analysis, it doesn't tell you anything. Okay, great, you dreamt about having sex with, I don't know,
Someone not your spouse.
Yeah, exactly. Someone not your spouse. What does this tell you exactly? It tells you that you don't love your spouse? No, it doesn't tell you that. It tells you that that you want to actually be with this person. No, it doesn't tell you anything. People think of dreams as the junk thought, as basically the part of your brain that's cycling through all the things that it doesn't need. It's sort of like the shredder of all the emotions that you don't really need. And we have this idea that a dream resets you, it refreshes you. And that's so you look at Freud and you say, well, big deal. It's you've looked at all that stuff, but they're meaningless. And here's the funny thing. Freud would totally agree. Freud doesn't think that the dreams contain some big secret about you. That's actually more Jung than Freud. There's nothing in your dreams. There's no tarot card reading. There's no astrology of your dreams. You're not trying to dip into your dreams and say this contains some inner truth about me.
There's no system of meaning.
Yeah, exactly. And the same is true for the commodity form. Like, at the end of the day, a t-shirt that has, I don't know, a sweatshirt with Deus on it, or a t-shirt with Nike on it, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that Nike is conceptually different from Deus. It doesn't mean that one shoe, it doesn't mean that the shoe with the drop of blood in it is very different from the shoe with the drop of holy water in it. And yet, at the same time, it's super important, that difference. And let's say that we got the Lil Nas X shoe, the one with the drop of water and the one with the drop of blood. This is Zizek's. You've brought me coffee without cream or coffee without water. Having the drop of holy water that you don't see is coffee without cream. Having the shoe with the drop of blood is coffee without milk, basically. So we fill in that gap, and that's what's so meaningful. And so here again, we have the content of the form itself. Because if you're just analyzing the dreams, you just shrug. You say, well, it doesn't matter. You analyze the Lil Nas X shoe. You say, well, it doesn't matter. You don't see the drop. But that's not the point. The point is exactly that the fact that it doesn't matter, that it's this empty space, can be filled in, and filled in very, very different ways. And that filling in of that gap is where subjectivity emerges. And so that's exactly why we have, according to Zizek, Marx inventing the system, the symptom, the return of the repressed in the commodity form. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned the shoe, the Lil Nas X one, because that's like the best example you could possibly have for that. And so all you have to know, and to finally bring this back to jokes, right? What a joke does every single time, the structure of a joke is that it is essentially a nothing. Jokes don't exist by themselves. Jokes are symptomatic. If jokes are preying upon the social interactions that we're not acknowledging, what makes jokes so funny is we can say things that we otherwise wouldn't say. It's a way of expressing something that everybody knows to be true, but we're not going to formally articulate it. And what's beautiful about jokes is that jokes are not just a way at getting at the content of the form. They are the content of the form. Jokes can function as pure ideology in that sense because they're like Malevich's square. They can undermine ideology. They're like the shoehorn that gets into the shoe that slips something on. And at the same time, they can whatever. I don't want to stretch that metaphor too much, literally. And so when you're telling a joke, there's an emptiness in every joke. Every joke contains an empty space that has to be filled in by somebody else. And that filling in by somebody else is where the joke comes alive. And that's exactly what Zizek's theory of subjectivity is that subjectivity is the ultimate joke. It's the ultimate bad joke, which is it doesn't exist in the world as such, but it creates a constitutive lack, a constitutive negativity or emptiness that we fill in. And through the filling in, it comes into being as if it were natural. And the reason we need ideology is because ideology retroactively tells us, yes, this is natural, even though it's totally constructed, totally fake. Ideology is the glue that stitches something together, even though it can only exist by means of creating a fissure. And that's what jokes are. Jokes create that gap that you have to complete. It's like a melody being hummed where you have to complete the final bar. That's how jokes work. And that's why jokes deserve to be taken very, very seriously. And so I hope I haven't led you astray. That I was just going to crack jokes here. It's not stand-up comedy. It's about what is the relationship between jokes and ideology, the relationship between jokes and philosophy, between jokes and form and content. So this, my friends, is not a theory of jokes, but it's the jokes of theory. It's the way in which jokes are being played on us through the process of being alive in the world. And that's the ultimate thing, is being alive is a bad joke. This is the thing, the gods are laughing at us. When we think we're up here, we're about to be kicked down a notch. In heaven, there is no laughter because there is no tragedy. Whereas the world is full of laughter because the world is a total tragedy. To be alive is a terrible proposition, and at the same time, to be happy in the world is to recognize the darkness of the proposition of being alive. It's amor fati, it's Sisyphus taking charge of his life by assuming his fate. Life is a terrible proposition, and once you realize that, you have all of the tools you need to be happy. On that note, thank you everybody for watching today. We're going to continue this discussion in the seminar. So if you are on our Discord or our Clubhouse, you are welcome to join us for another hour of interactive live discussion, which is very fun. It's where we get to know our students. If you would like to download the audio for this class, if you would, and all of our classes, our entire backlog of audio, you can listen to them as a podcast. If you'd like to download the lecture notes, the study guide, if you'd like to download the reading list, if you'd like to join our masterclass, if you'd like to have our subscription package where we send you cool stuff every month, please go to
patreon.com/Jeneline
and Julian. There you go. I know we haven't got it done yet. So we actually recently got to 100 patrons, and then the gods laughed at us.
No, we just full stop. We got to 100. That was our goal.
That is your version of reality. We got to 100 patrons on April 30th, and then at the end of the month, we usually lose a bunch of patrons, and so we went right back down. We're currently at 83, but that's okay, because we are just happy to be doing this. The fact that we can share our passion for theory and philosophy with you guys, that we can make philosophy something that is universally accessible to everybody, means a huge deal. So we just want to say thank you. We want to say thank you for being a part of this class. We've been doing this for a year.
Yes.
We've only had the Patreon for 2 months. Mm-hmm. It is an absolute pleasure to have you guys join these classes.
Yes.
We want to keep doing them forever. So if you'd like to support these classes, if you'd like to be able to listen to them once they're done, if you'd like to get access to our entire backlog of classes, please consider becoming a patron. It starts at just $5 a month, and it makes a really, really big difference for us. Yes. So on that note, we will now go to the Discord and to the Clubhouse channel where we can continue this discussion.
You can find Julian on Clubhouse at
Sublime Hysteric. Sublime Hysteric, which is how Lacan refers to Hegel. Random, I guess, but okay. So thank you guys for joining. If this was the very first class you joined and you stuck around, thank you so much for being part of our learning community.
Yes.
Be happy to talk to you more in the DM. Always happy to take questions. But now we're going to wrap up. We're going to go over to our seminar on Discord and Clubhouse. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope that you'll consider joining our Patreon. All right, www.patreon.com/Jeneline and Julian, or click the link in bio. Thank you, guys, and we shall see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.